Hello and welcome back to the garage. Today / tonight, however long this takes, we're going to be tackling this ugliness. This thing is terrible. It's been an eyesore since I tore the car down. But there's a whole lot of spot welds on this thing, and they are all over the place. It was like they were hand drilled and not drilled by a machine and welded. Let's get to it. Now, for the sake of this video, I marked up the spot welds on this panel, and if you can tell, they are definitely not straight by any means with the panel. They're kind of all over the place, which is a typical thing with Datsuns. Every panel, every bracket that I have removed from this car or had to work on has had a very inconsistent pattern with the spot welds. Also, this line right here, that is where the new panel and this existing panel kind of overlap. I left a good chunk of room on the new panel, that way I can cut the panel and get it fitted properly so there's not any wonky gaps. But the next step in this project is going to be using this guy. If you don't know what this is, it's a spring-loaded center punch. So I can punch each one of the holes here, and then I can start using my spot weld drill bit and get this panel off of here.
Silhouettes of you are like a taunt. Never really know just what you want. With you I don't ever feel calm. I can feel the sweat inside my palms. Play with me like cats and a string.
So you may or may not have seen it, but there was actually small bits of rust that came out of here and some rust dust that came out of here. That is the unfortunate downside to this design. Everything is supposed to trickle down and then out this drain hole. The problem is they clog. You're actually supposed to do maintenance on drain holes, even on modern day cars, just to make sure that they don't plug up like it did in this and cause all this rot. The other thing you probably noticed is this panel was flexing. This is the piece that adds structure to this whole nose, and this whole nose is what holds the hood springs and the hinges for the hood. So with all this flex in here, it definitely needs to be taken care of. We'll get into now spot welding, or not spot welding, spot drilling all of these places and get this panel off of here. And if you've never seen one, this is a spot weld drill bit. The point in the center is spring loaded, so you push down on it, and then the teeth on the edge are what drill out the hole. You do have to be really careful. You probably can maybe see it there, but this is a two-sided piece, and then a bunch of the teeth are broken off on the other side. These are pretty fragile, so you just got to be nice and slow and take it easy. And if for whatever reason it walks around too much, well, then you'll have to go in with a super small drill bit and just drill a pilot hole. That way, or not pilot hole, just a pilot spot. That way the drill bit cannot chase around and create all kinds of problems.
Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, fuck everybody, just do your thing. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
Hey, panel is off. I did save the time and I did the grinding off camera. As you can tell, this area is kind of ugly. The result is 1, thin sheet metal, and 2, I'm not sure, but if you can see it here, this is what's left of rust after I got done hitting it with a grinder. And it's the unfortunate downside to how this car was designed. Literally behind every one of these panels where these gaps are, that didn't have seam sealer or wore off, there's going to be a layer of rust between each panel. And that is on every panel, on every Datsun. I mean, this car was an Arizona car for its entire life until I got it. And since I've had it, it's only spent maybe 2 months outside during the winter. Past that, it's been garage kept the entire time. And it still has all that rust, which is part of the reason I got rid of the radiator support on this car, because it had the same kind of issue. And the welding you see here is the result of what happens when you think you have a clean panel to work with, and in fact you have rust that every time you weld it keeps walking and walking and walking, and you get all this ugliness. So I've kind of decided that when after I get the car all done and running again in the off season, after I finally drive the car, that from the front strut tower forward, I'm probably going to cut that all out and do some kind of a tube frame, just because I don't want to deal with rust. Until then, we're going to hit this with primer. I'm going to seal the edges of what I did for the weld job, just to prolong its life a little bit until I get around to making the tube front. And then we'll put the panel on. And then I also have this stuff. It's internal frame coating from Eastwood. I bought it for my frame rails because I redid my frame rails a couple years and haven't gotten around to coating them. But because the inner tube structure, this is a fresh air vent that goes into the car, this whole deal along the side. I think I'm going to use a couple of cans of this internal frame coating and coat that. That way, even when I do get done cutting the car, the section that isn't cut apart will be protected from any further rust. So next step is painting, sealing, and then mocking up where I'm going to drill on this panel here. Alright, while the paint and seam sealer are drying on the car, we're going to take this original piece and lay it over this piece, get it lined up as easy or as much as possible. That way we have a spot or a template to where we can drill our holes for the new spot welds. That way everything lines up as best as possible. I probably won't use as many spot welds as what's on here, but we'll see. Alright, so we got the holes all drilled out for the new spot welds. The last thing we need to do is, if you notice, the green panel is a lot longer than the black panel. And that's because you're always wanting to cut the original panel shorter than what your new patch panel is. That way you can fit the new panel up to the existing car, because there's no way that this panel is ever going to fit the way that the OE did. And in this case, this is a pretty good product, but there's still issues with it. So we'll get it fitted up to the car, and then we'll be able to get it welded in.
Hey man, how the hell you doing? I've been just fine, living life with the noose, and in my mind, all I hear is music. Watching your mouth move, damn you look stupid. I feel like everyone's a stranger. Small talk with your narcissistic neighbor. She's real hot, but they said to never date her. Ha, I agree, but you did, and I hate her. You wanna get away? You better get in line. Won't go another day of wasting any time. I've got a lot to say, can't hold it in this time. Got no filter, I got no filter. 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 No filter, I got no filter.
Alright, so I got the panel all welded into place. I had to, I'm pretty sure you saw it in the time lapse, but I did some more off camera where I used a couple of body hammers to get everything to sit flush with each other and make as small of a gap as possible. From here, I'm going to grind down the spot welds a little bit, grind down my seam over here, and then make sure everything is still flush, and probably run a bead of seam sealer around the edge of this besides the drain hole, and then give it a coat of primer, and that should be it for this portion. And here's the finished product. I scuffed up the surface of the panel and then went through and did some self-etching primer because I pretty much had everything down to bare metal. Then I used some seam sealer on the outside edge where I welded, and then I gave it a coat of regular primer, and that should have it all sealed up for the time being. Overall, I'm very happy with the KFVintage or Classic Fab Vintage body panel that I purchased. There's definitely some fitment issues, so if you're going for like 100% OE, this may not be the product for you. There are certain things that just don't line up correctly. I had to drill the holes on the back panel, where the bolt goes through the two panels and actually like bolts into the body for the hood hinges. Those holes in the secondary panel I had to drill out and make them bigger because the nuts that are welded on the panel that you purchase, they're just slightly off. There's also a bend in the very top of the bracket that follows one of the body lines that bend isn't 100% where it's supposed to be, so things don't necessarily line up, but with a hammer you can kind of bend those back into place. Overall, I'm still very happy with it. I personally don't know if I would have the patience to make the panel as a whole, so that's why I'm happy that they make this product, because they're the only company that I found that actually makes this panel. So it's a 10 in my book, probably a bunch of 7s in other people's books, but anyways, I'm satisfied. The procedure that I followed to do all this definitely isn't the correct way to do it, but it seals everything the way that it needs to be in order to prevent further rust until I get to a point where I can either go back and fix some of my other mistakes, or like I'm planning at this point is to just cut part of the front of the car off and make a tube chassis cage kind of deal. But you know, as you saw in the picture, or the video, you can't really tell from a distance that this is something that's aftermarket. And you're gonna have a fender in place of it, and then you're gonna have the hood and hood hinges on the other side. So you're really not gonna see any of this. It was more that structure that needed to be put back in place. Otherwise, you know, you're doing a buck 20 down the road on a course, and it could pretty easily rip the hood out from the body because of how weak that part of the chassis was. But anyways, super happy. One more thing off my list. We're going to keep on going to the next thing.